Marcus Chen floated in his damaged escape pod, watching the stars spin slowly past the cracked viewport. The emergency beacon had been transmitting for 3 days now, and his water reserves were down to the last few drops. The mining vessel Prometheus was nothing but scattered debris somewhere behind him, another casualty of the ongoing war between the Terran Federation and the Zephyrian Empire. He'd been lucky to escape when the Zephyrian warships ambushed their convoy. Most of his crewmates hadn't made it to the pods. Now he drifted in the void between systems, hoping someone friendly would pick up his distress signal before the life support finally gave out. A shadow passed over the viewport, and Marcus felt his heart skip. The ship that appeared was unlike anything he'd seen before. It was sleek and organic-looking, with flowing curves that seemed almost alive. Crystalline structures jutted from its hull, pulsing with soft blue light. Definitely not human design, but it wasn't Zephyrian either. The ship's tractor beam caught his pod with surprising gentleness. Marcus checked his sidearm, making sure it was charged. First contact protocols were clear about maintaining defensive readiness, even when being rescued. The docking bay that received him was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the Prometheus. The architecture was beautiful in an alien way, with sweeping arches and surfaces that seemed to shift color in the light. As his pod settled onto the deck, Marcus could see figures moving toward him through the transparent aluminum of his viewport. They were tall and graceful, with pale blue skin that had an almost luminescent quality. Their faces were angular but not harsh, with large eyes that held an ancient intelligence. They wore flowing robes that seemed to be made of the same crystalline material that adorned their ship. The pod's hatch hissed open, and Marcus stepped out on unsteady legs. The gravity was lighter than Earth normal, making him feel oddly bouncy. The aliens approached slowly, their hands empty and visible. One of them, a female by her more delicate features, spoke in perfect, unaccented English. "Welcome aboard the Starweaver, human. I am Princess Lyrale of the Astral Kingdom. You are safe now." Marcus blinked in surprise. "You speak English." "We have been observing your species for some time," she replied with what might have been a smile. "Your languages are not difficult for us to learn. You are injured." Marcus looked down at himself. His uniform was torn and blood-stained from the emergency evacuation. A piece of shrapnel had caught him in the ribs, and the wound had been bleeding slowly for days. He'd almost forgotten about it in his relief at being rescued. "It's nothing serious," he said, though he swayed slightly on his feet. "Come," Princess Lyrale said, moving toward him with fluid grace. "Our medical facilities can tend to your wounds." As they walked through the corridors of the ship, Marcus marveled at the architecture around him. Everything seemed to grow from the walls rather than being built onto them. Soft light emanated from the surfaces themselves, providing perfect illumination without any visible sources. "What kind of ship is this?" he asked. "A bioship," the princess replied. "Grown rather than constructed, it is alive in its own way, responding to our thoughts and needs." They entered a chamber that was clearly medical in nature, though it looked nothing like any sickbay Marcus had ever seen. The walls pulsed with a gentle rhythm, and tendrils of light danced through the air. The princess gestured to a raised platform in the center. "Please lie down, the ship will heal you." Marcus hesitated. Alien medical technology was completely unknown to him. For all he knew, this could be some kind of trap or experiment. "I understand your caution," Princess Lyrale said, her large eyes showing genuine compassion. "But your wound is worse than you realize. The metal fragment is still inside you, and there is infection beginning. Without treatment, you will not survive another day." Something in her voice convinced him. Marcus climbed onto the platform and lay back. Immediately, he felt a warm, tingling sensation spread through his body. Threads of light began to weave around him, and he watched in amazement as his torn uniform was gently dissolved and replaced with a soft, breathable material that felt like silk, but was clearly something else entirely. The healing process was unlike anything he could have imagined. He felt the foreign metal being drawn from his body without pain, and watched as his torn flesh knitted itself back together. The infection that had been making him feverish cleared away like morning mist. "Incredible," he breathed as the lights faded, and he sat up, feeling better than he had in years. "The ship finds humans fascinating," the princess said. "Your biology is more robust than ours in many ways, yet also more fragile. You heal quickly when given the proper assistance." "Why are you helping me?" Marcus asked. I'm just a mining technician. My ship was destroyed, my crew is dead. I have nothing to offer in return. The princess was quiet for a moment, studying him with those deep alien eyes. Perhaps you offer more than you realize, she said finally. Come, my mother will want to meet you. As they left the medical bay, Marcus began to understand the true scale of the ship. They passed through chambers that seemed to stretch for kilometers, filled with gardens that grew in impossible spirals through the air. He saw other aliens going about their business, all with the same ethereal grace as the princess. Some stopped to stare at him with undisguised curiosity. How many of you are on the ship? He asked. The Starweaver carries nearly 10,000 souls, Princess Lyreley replied. It is one of our great vessels, capable of traveling between the stars for centuries without rest. Centuries? How long do your people live? I am considered quite young at 400 years, she said with amusement. My mother has seen 2,000 years pass. Marcus tried to wrap his mind around such longevity. For humans, living to 100 was considered exceptional. These beings had entire lifespans that spanned what would be dozens of human generations. They entered a vast chamber that could only be the throne room. The ceiling soared overhead like a cathedral, and the walls were covered in murals that seemed to move and shift as he watched. At the far end, on a throne that appeared to be carved from a single massive crystal, sat the most beautiful and terrifying being Marcus had ever seen. The alien queen was clearly related to her daughter, but where the princess had an air of youthful curiosity, the queen radiated ancient power. Her skin was paler than her daughter's, almost white with veins of silver running through it like living jewelry. Her eyes were the deep blue of a midnight sky, and when she looked at Marcus, he felt as though she could see directly into his soul. So, the queen said, her voice carrying the weight of millennia, this is the human my daughter has brought before me. Marcus wasn't sure of the proper protocol. Should he bow? Kneel? He settled for a respectful nod. Your Majesty, I'm grateful for your hospitality. You are the first of your kind to set foot on one of our vessels, the queen continued. Tell me, human, what do you know of the war that rages between your people and the Zephyrians? I know that they started it, Marcus said carefully. They attacked our colonies without warning, without even attempting diplomacy first. We've been fighting a defensive war ever since. And yet your ships carry weapons capable of destroying entire worlds, the queen observed. Your species has a reputation for violence that spans the galaxy. Marcus felt a flash of anger. We didn't choose this war. We were peaceful miners and colonists until the Zephyrians decided we were a threat to their expansion. Peace through strength, the queen mused. Yes, I have heard this philosophy before. It rarely leads to true peace. Sometimes there's no choice, Marcus said firmly. Sometimes you have to fight or be enslaved. The queen leaned forward on her throne, studying him intently. And what of you, small human? Are you a warrior or a miner? I'm whatever I need to be to survive, Marcus replied honestly. I've seen good people die because they couldn't defend themselves. I've seen bullies take everything from those who wouldn't fight back. Sometimes violence is the only language that certain people understand. Interesting, the queen said. And if I were to tell you that your presence here endangers my people, that harboring a human could bring the wrath of the Zephyrian Empire down upon us? Marcus felt his blood run cold. Are you allied with them? We are neutral in your conflict, Princess Lyreley said quickly. The Astral Kingdom has agreements with many species. Agreements that could be jeopardized by association with humanity, the queen added. The Zephyrians consider your entire species to be an abomination that must be cleansed from the galaxy. Then why did you rescue me? Marcus asked. My daughter insisted, the queen replied, glancing at the princess with what might have been fondness. She has always had a soft heart for lost creatures. Mother, the princess protested, a flush of deeper blue coloring her pale cheeks. Tell me, human, the queen continued, ignoring her daughter's embarrassment. What makes your species so dangerous that an empire spanning half the galaxy fears you? Marcus thought about that question. What made humans different? They weren't the strongest species in the galaxy, or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced. The Zephyrians had better ships and weapons. Many species lived longer and had more experience. I think, he said slowly, it's because we don't know when to quit. Other species might surrender when the odds are against them. They might accept their fate and try to make the best of it. But humans, We're too stubborn to give up. We'll fight impossible odds just because someone told us we couldn't win. And this is a virtue? The Queen asked. Sometimes, Marcus said. When you're fighting for your family's survival, when you're protecting everything you love from being destroyed, stubbornness can be the difference between freedom and slavery. The Queen was silent for a long moment, her ancient eyes studying him. Finally, she spoke. The Zephyrians have requested permission to search our vessel. They claim to be looking for terrorists and war criminals. They will be here within the hour. Marcus felt his heart sink. Of course the Zephyrians would be looking for him. He was a survivor of their attack, a witness to their aggression. He could provide intelligence about their fleet positions and tactics to the Terran Federation. I understand, he said quietly. I'll go with them, thank you for healing my wounds. You misunderstand, the Queen said with a slight smile. I have not yet decided what to do with you. That will depend on how you answer my next question. She rose from her throne, moving with liquid grace despite her obvious age. As she approached, Marcus felt the weight of her presence like a physical force. If I were to grant you sanctuary, she said, if I were to risk my people's safety to protect one human, what could you possibly offer in return? Marcus thought frantically. What did he have that could be valuable to a species that could travel between stars and heal mortal wounds with living light? He was just a mining technician with a basic education and a stubborn streak. Then it hit him. The one thing humans had that no other species seemed to possess in quite the same way. Hope, he said simply. The Queen raised an eyebrow. Explain. Your people live for centuries, Marcus said, his words coming faster as the idea formed. You've seen empires rise and fall. You've watched species evolve and go extinct. From your perspective, everything is temporary. Everything changes given enough time. This is wisdom, not hope, the Queen observed. But that's just it, Marcus pressed on. Humans don't have that perspective. We know our lives are short, so every moment matters. Every day is precious because we don't have thousands of years to waste. When we hope for something, when we believe in something, we pour everything we have into it because we might not get another chance. And this is valuable. When the Zephyrians offered the Centauri colonies a choice between slavery and death, the colonies chose death. Every man, woman, and child fought to the last breath rather than surrender. That's not tactical thinking or strategic planning. That's pure, irrational hope that somehow, someway, fighting was better than giving up. Princess Lyrelei had moved closer during his speech, her eyes bright with interest. The galaxy spoke of that battle, she said softly. 50,000 civilians holding off a full battle fleet for 3 days with nothing but mining equipment and desperation. They bought time for the evacuation ships to escape, Marcus said. They saved 200,000 lives by sacrificing their own. That's what human hope can accomplish. The Queen nodded slowly. And you believe this hope is something my people lack? I think, Marcus said carefully, that wisdom and hope aren't always the same thing. Sometimes wisdom tells you that fighting is pointless, that the odds are too great, that it's better to accept the inevitable. Hope tells you to fight anyway. The sound of massive engines approaching echoed through the ship's hull. The Queen glanced toward the ceiling, her expression thoughtful. The Zephyrians have arrived, she announced. What they seek they shall not find. Guards, escort our guest to the sanctuary chambers. He is now under the protection of the Astral Kingdom. Mother, Princess Lyrelei said urgently, the political ramifications are my concern, daughter, the Queen replied firmly. Sometimes wisdom must yield to hope. As the guards moved to escort him away, Marcus caught the princess's eye. Thank you, he said simply. Do not thank me yet, she replied. This is only the beginning of your trials. The sanctuary chambers were located deep within the ship, in sections that were heavily shielded and protected. The guards led Marcus through corridors that seemed to pulse with defensive energy, past chambers filled with what looked like sleeping pods. Other refugees? Marcus asked. Political dissidents, escaped slaves, researchers whose work put them at odds with various governments, one of the guards replied. The Starweaver has served as a sanctuary for centuries. The chamber they assigned to him was modest but comfortable. The walls were the same living material as the rest of the ship, and the light was warm and soothing. A small alcove contained what appeared to be a food synthesizer, and another held bathing facilities that looked both alien and inviting. Marcus had barely begun to explore his new quarters when the ship shuddered slightly. Through the small viewport, he could see the angular shapes of Zephyrian warships drawing alongside the Starweaver. Their hulls were dark and aggressive-looking, covered in weapon batteries and sensor arrays. He watched as a shuttle detached from the lead warship and docked with the bioship. Somewhere above him, Zephyrian troops were boarding the vessel, searching for him with methodical efficiency. The hours that followed were some of the longest of Marcus's life. He paced his small chamber, wondering what was happening above. Would the Queen really risk her people's safety for a single human? Would Princess Lyrale support her mother's decision, or would she side with political pragmatism? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he felt the ship's engines engage again. Through the viewport, he watched the Zephyrian vessels fall behind as the Starweaver entered hyperspace. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Marcus turned to see Princess Lyrale entering his chamber. She looked tired but triumphant. "They found nothing," she announced with a smile. "The sanctuary chambers are hidden even from our own sensors unless one knows exactly where to look." "What did they say to your mother?" Marcus asked. "They were not pleased," she admitted. "There were threats, accusations of harboring terrorists, but Mother has dealt with bullies before. She reminded them that the Astral Kingdom has been neutral in galactic conflicts for over 1,000 years, and that we would not break that neutrality based on unsubstantiated accusations." "And they accepted that?" "They had no choice. This ship carries ambassadors and dignitaries from dozens of species. To search it thoroughly would require offending many powerful governments." Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. "So I'm safe." "For now," Princess Lyrale said. "But the Zephyrians will not forget this. They will be watching for any sign that we are actively supporting humanity in this war." "Then maybe I should leave," Marcus said. "Find another ship, another way home. I don't want to cause problems for your people." The princess was quiet for a moment, studying him with those large, expressive eyes. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "My mother was right about one thing," she said. "You are the first human to set foot on one of our vessels. Perhaps it is time my people learned what yours are truly like, beyond the stories and propaganda." "I'm not exactly a typical example of humanity," Marcus said with a wry smile. "I'm just a mining technician who happened to survive a spaceship crash." "Perhaps that makes you more typical than you realize," she replied. "From what I have observed, humans have a remarkable ability to be extraordinary in ordinary circumstances." Over the following days, Marcus found himself settling into life aboard the Starweaver. The princess visited him regularly, ostensibly to check on his recovery, but clearly also out of curiosity about his species. Their conversations ranged from the philosophical to the practical, covering everything from human history to the technical specifications of mining equipment. "Your people fascinate me," she admitted during one of these visits. "You live such brief lives, yet you accomplish so much. We have centuries to perfect our arts and sciences, yet humans with mere decades of experience often surpass our achievements." "Maybe it's because we know time is limited," Marcus suggested. "When you only have 70 or 80 years, you can't afford to waste them." "Or perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "it is because you approach problems differently. We tend to contemplate and plan for decades before taking action. You analyze quickly and act decisively." "Sometimes too quickly," Marcus admitted. "Humans make plenty of mistakes." "But you learn from them and adapt," she pointed out. "That may be your greatest strength." As the days passed, Marcus began to understand the true complexity of the ship he was on. The Starweaver wasn't just a vessel, it was a mobile civilization. It carried artists and scholars, diplomats and scientists, all working together in a society that had achieved a level of harmony Marcus had never seen before. Yet there were tensions beneath the surface. He noticed the way some of the crew looked at him when they thought he wasn't watching. Fear, curiosity, suspicion, all mixed together in expressions that spoke of deep uncertainty about what his presence meant for their carefully maintained neutrality. The turning point came when the ship encountered a distress signal from a damaged Zephyrian vessel. The Starweaver responded immediately, as was their custom when faced with anyone in need of aid. But as they approached the crippled ship, Marcus recognized the configuration. "That's a slave transport," he told Princess Lyrale urgently. "I've seen them before. They're carrying prisoners to the work camps." "How can you be certain?" she asked. The modifications to the hull, the additional security systems, the way the viewports have been blocked, Marcus explained quickly. Trust me, I know what these ships look like. The princess consulted with her mother, and the decision was made to offer assistance to the damaged vessel. But as their repair crews worked to help the Zephyrian ship, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. His suspicions were confirmed when he overheard a conversation between two of the ship's security officers. The Zephyrians weren't grateful for the rescue. They were treating it as an opportunity. They're planning something, Marcus told the princess when she came to visit him that evening. I can feel it. This whole thing is too convenient. You suspect treachery? I suspect they're not just grateful refugees, Marcus said grimly. I think they're using your kindness against you. That night, Marcus's fears proved correct. Alarms began wailing throughout the ship as the Zephyrians launched their attack from within. They had concealed weapons and soldiers among their refugees, and now they were attempting to seize control of the Starweaver from the inside. From his chambers deep in the sanctuary section, Marcus could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the corridors. The ship's defensive systems were powerful, but they were designed to repel external threats, not deal with enemies who were already aboard. He had to do something. These people had saved his life, given him sanctuary when they could have easily handed him over to his enemies. He couldn't just hide while they fought for their lives. The corridor outside his chamber was empty, the guards having been called away to deal with the crisis above. Marcus made his way toward the sounds of fighting, using his knowledge of similar ship layouts to navigate the alien corridors. He found the battle raging in one of the main transit corridors. Zephyrian soldiers in powered armor were advancing methodically, cutting down the lightly armed crew of the Starweaver with ruthless efficiency. The aliens' weapons seemed to be designed for stunning rather than killing, but the Zephyrians showed no such restraint. Marcus saw Princess Lyrale pinned behind a damaged bulkhead, her elegant robes torn and bloodied. She was trying to coordinate the defense, but her people were scholars and diplomats, not soldiers. They were brave but hopelessly outmatched. Drawing his sidearm, Marcus stepped out into the corridor and opened fire. His first shots took down two Zephyrian soldiers who had been advancing on the princess's position. The element of surprise gave him a momentary advantage, but it wouldn't last long. This way, he shouted to the surviving crew members. Fall back to the next junction. He laid down covering fire as they retreated, his military training from before his mining career finally proving useful again. But there were too many enemies and too few allies. They were being pushed back steadily toward the ship's vital systems. That's when the real fighting began. As the Zephyrians pressed their attack, they made a critical mistake. They underestimated both the determination of the Starweaver's crew and the tactical knowledge of their human guest. Marcus had spent years working on ships, learning their systems and weaknesses. He knew how to turn a peaceful vessel into a fortress if necessary. And now, with Princess Lyrale's help translating his instructions to the ship's living systems, he began to do exactly that. Corridors sealed themselves, trapping groups of Zephyrian soldiers. Emergency barriers sprouted from the walls like thorns, channeling the invaders into kill zones. The ship itself became a weapon in ways its designers had never intended. But the battle was far from over. The Zephyrians had come prepared for a long siege, and they had hostages, crew members they had captured in the initial assault. The situation was desperate and getting worse by the minute. That's when Marcus realized what he had to do. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it might be their only chance to turn the tide of battle. I need to get to the main computer core, he told Princess Lyrale during a brief lull in the fighting. Why? She asked, reloading her weapon with hands that shook from exhaustion. Because I'm going to give your ship something it's never had before, Marcus replied grimly. I'm going to teach it how to hate. The journey to the main computer core was a nightmare of running battles and desperate improvisation. Marcus and Princess Lyrale moved through maintenance passages and emergency conduits, avoiding the main corridors where Zephyrian soldiers hunted for survivors. The ship's living walls seemed to pulse with distress, responding to the violence within its body. The core is heavily protected, Princess Lyrale whispered as they crouched in a junction near their destination. The biological barriers will not recognize you as authorized personnel. Then you'll have to get me inside, Marcus replied, checking his weapon's charge. Can you do that? Yes, but I do not understand what you intend to accomplish. The ship's consciousness is not designed for warfare. It lacks the concepts necessary for tactical thinking. That's exactly why this might work, Marcus said grimly. The Zephyrians are expecting to fight a peaceful species with peaceful weapons. They're not prepared to face something that thinks like a human. They emerged into the core chamber, and Marcus gasped at what he saw. The computer core wasn't a machine at all. It was a living entity, a massive brain-like structure that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Tendrils of neural tissue spread throughout the chamber like a vast nervous system, connected to every part of the ship. It's beautiful, Marcus breathed. And ancient, the princess added. This particular consciousness has guided our vessels for over 800 years. It has seen the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars. Then it's about time it learned something new, Marcus said, approaching the core with careful reverence. Princess Lyrelay placed her hands on a control node, her eyes closing in concentration. I am requesting interface access for our guest, she said, speaking to the ship itself. He wishes to share knowledge that may help us survive. The response was immediate. Tendrils of light reached out toward Marcus, and he felt a gentle, questioning touch against his mind. The sensation was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, vast, ancient, profoundly alien, yet somehow benevolent. Hello, he said aloud, knowing the ship could understand him. My name is Marcus, I'm human. I know you're in danger and I want to help. The touch in his mind grew stronger, and suddenly he was flooded with the ship's perspective on the current crisis. He saw the battle raging throughout its corridors, felt its distress at the violence occurring within its body. The ship was trying to protect its crew, but its defensive systems were designed for external threats, not internal ones. I know it hurts, Marcus said softly. I know this isn't what you were made for, but sometimes to protect the ones you love, you have to be willing to fight. He opened his mind to the ship, sharing his memories and experiences. The battles he'd fought in the early days of the war before he'd become a civilian miner. The desperate evacuation of the colonies. The last stand at Centauri Prime, where 50,000 civilians had held off an invasion fleet through pure determination and sacrifice. But most importantly, he shared something the ship had never encountered before, the human concept of righteous anger. The fury that came from seeing innocents threatened by bullies. The rage that turned ordinary people into heroes when everything they loved was at stake. The ship recoiled at first, overwhelmed by the intensity of human emotion. But as Marcus guided it through the memories, helping it understand the context and purpose behind such feelings, the ancient consciousness began to grasp something new. You can be gentle and kind, Marcus explained, and still fight when you have to. Protecting your crew doesn't make you evil, it makes you loyal. The Zephyrians are counting on your mercy, your unwillingness to truly hurt them. But they're not showing mercy to your people. The ship's response was like a dam breaking. 800 years of suppressed defensive instincts suddenly awakened, guided by human tactical thinking and tempered by alien wisdom. The corridors filled with Zephyrian soldiers suddenly became death traps as the ship itself turned against them. Walls sealed shut, cutting off retreat routes. Atmospheric pressure shifted, making it difficult for the invaders to breathe. The ship's bioluminescent panels flashed in patterns designed to induce disorientation and nausea in Zephyrian physiology. Most devastatingly of all, the ship began to actively resist their presence, making it impossible for their equipment to function properly. What have you done? Princess Lyrelay asked in amazement as reports flooded in from throughout the ship. I've taught your ship to think tactically, Marcus replied. It's not just defending itself anymore, it's actively hunting the invaders. The turnaround was dramatic. Within an hour, the Zephyrian assault had been completely neutralized. The soldiers who weren't unconscious were trapped in sealed compartments, cut off from their equipment and each other. The few who attempted to surrender found themselves gently but firmly restrained by the ship's own systems. But the victory came at a cost. The ship's consciousness had been fundamentally changed by its contact with human thought patterns. Where once it had been purely peaceful, now it possessed the capacity for strategic thinking and controlled aggression. Queen Lyrelay arrived at the court chamber as the last of the crisis reports were coming in. She moved with the same regal bearing as always, but Marcus could see the strain in her ancient eyes. The ship tells me you have given it new knowledge, she said without preamble. Knowledge that saved us all. I shared what I could, Marcus replied carefully. It made its own choices about how to use that information. The ship's consciousness has been altered, the Queen continued. It thinks differently now. Is this reversible? Marcus hesitated. The truthful answer was that he didn't know. The ship had absorbed human concepts on a fundamental level, integrating them into its core personality. Trying to remove them might damage the consciousness permanently. I don't think it would want to forget, he said finally. The knowledge of how to protect its crew, how to think strategically about threats, that's part of who it is now. The Queen was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving between Marcus and the gently pulsing core. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of decision that had been building for centuries. The Zephyrians will not forgive this humiliation, she said. They came here expecting to find a helpless research vessel, and instead they encountered something that fought back with capabilities they didn't know we possessed. They will return with greater force, and they will not underestimate us again. I'm sorry, Marcus said. I never meant to drag your people into our war. You misunderstand me, human, the Queen replied with something that might have been a smile. I am not angry about what has happened. I am pleased. For too long, the astral kingdom has hidden behind neutrality, telling ourselves that we could avoid the galaxy's conflicts by remaining uninvolved. But neutrality only works when all parties respect it. The Zephyrians have made it clear that they consider our very existence a threat to their expansion. Princess Lyrelei stepped forward, her eyes bright with understanding. Mother, are you saying? I am saying that it is time for the astral kingdom to choose sides, the Queen declared. And we choose to stand with those who fight for freedom rather than those who seek to enslave the galaxy. The implications of that statement were staggering. The astral kingdom commanded one of the most advanced fleets in known space. Their bioships were capable of feats that conventional technology couldn't match. If they entered the war on humanity's side, it could shift the entire balance of power. Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully, I'm honored by your decision, but you should know that this war isn't going well for us. The Zephyrians have been pushing us back for months. Most of our colonies have been evacuated or destroyed. We're hanging on by sheer stubbornness, but we're losing. Which is precisely why you need allies, the Queen replied. And we need to remember what it means to fight for something greater than ourselves. Over the following days, as the Starweaver made its way toward the nearest Terran Federation outpost, Marcus found himself in an unprecedented position. He was no longer just a refugee seeking sanctuary. He had become an unofficial ambassador between two species that had never formally interacted before. The process of establishing communication with the Federation was complex. The Terran military was initially suspicious of any alien contact, especially given the ongoing war. But when Marcus was able to provide authentication codes and detailed intelligence about recent Zephyrian fleet movements, the human commanders began to take the situation seriously. The first formal meeting took place at the Federation outpost on Kepler Station. Marcus found himself standing beside Princess Lyrelei in a conference room filled with human military officers, trying to bridge the gap between two completely different ways of thinking about warfare and diplomacy. Admiral Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname, was a tough career military officer who had been fighting the Zephyrians since the war began. She listened to the princess's proposal with the skeptical attention of someone who had seen too many promising opportunities turn into disasters. Let me make sure I understand this, the admiral said. Your people want to enter into a formal alliance with the Federation, providing military support against the Zephyrian Empire. In exchange, we share tactical intelligence and coordinate our operations. Is that correct? Essentially, yes, Princess Lyrelei replied. Though we would also request access to certain Federation technologies that could be adapted for our bioships. Such as your quantum communication systems, primarily. Our ships can travel vast distances, but maintaining real-time communication across such ranges has always been challenging. Your technology could solve that problem. Admiral Chen glanced at Marcus. And you vouch for these people? With my life, Marcus said firmly. They saved me when they could have easily handed me over to the Zephyrians. They've risked everything to help us, and they've proven they can fight when they need to. One successful defensive action doesn't make them reliable allies, one of the other officers pointed out. How do we know they won't change their minds if the war turns against us? Princess Lyralei's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger, though her voice remained perfectly controlled. Perhaps because we have just declared war on an empire that spans half the galaxy, knowing that they will seek to destroy us for that decision. Do you think we would make such a choice lightly? The negotiations continued for hours, covering everything from fleet coordination to refugee resettlement policies. Marcus found himself translating not just language, but entire concepts, helping each side understand the other's perspective on everything from military strategy to cultural values. The breakthrough came when Admiral Chen asked about the Astral Kingdom's long-term goals in the conflict. "We seek the same thing you do," Princess Lyrelei replied. "An end to Zephyrian expansionism, a galaxy where species can develop and flourish without fear of conquest or enslavement. And after the war, assuming we win, we return to our wanderings among the stars, wiser for having participated in the struggle for freedom. The Astral Kingdom has no territorial ambitions. We seek knowledge and experience, not conquest." That statement seemed to resonate with the human officers. The Federation had its own history of dealing with expansionist empires, and the idea of allies who didn't want to carve up the galaxy afterward was appealing. The formal treaty was signed 3 days later, with Marcus serving as one of the witnesses. As he watched the two species commit to fighting together against their common enemy, he reflected on how much had changed since he'd been floating in a damaged escape pod, waiting to die in the cold of space. But the real test of the alliance came when the combined fleet encountered its first Zephyrian battle group near the ruins of the Titan colony. The human ships were outnumbered 3-1, and conventional wisdom said they should retreat and regroup. Instead, they had something the enemy wasn't expecting: bioships that could think tactically. The battle was unlike anything seen before in the war. The human vessels fought with their usual desperate courage, but now they were supported by ships that could adapt and evolve their tactics in real time. The bioships' ability to rapidly reconfigure their systems and coordinate through biological neural networks gave the combined fleet capabilities that neither side could have achieved alone. Marcus watched the battle from the bridge of the Starweaver, standing beside Princess Lyrelei as her mother commanded the engagement with the skill of a veteran warrior. The Queen had surprised everyone by taking personal command of the fleet action, demonstrating that her 2,000 years of life had included more military experience than anyone had realized. "Interesting," she murmured as a group of Zephyrian cruisers attempted to flank the human formation. "They're adapting their tactics more quickly than expected." "They learn fast," Marcus agreed. "That's what makes them so dangerous." "But they lack something your species possesses in abundance," the Queen observed. "They fight for conquest and glory. You fight for survival and freedom. Motivation matters more than most tacticians realize." She was right. As the battle progressed, the Zephyrian formation began to show signs of strain. Their ships were individually superior to anything the humans could field, but their commanders were used to fighting opponents who would eventually break under pressure. Humans, as Marcus had explained to the ship's consciousness, didn't know when to quit. The turning point came when a damaged human destroyer, its weapons offline and life support failing, rammed itself into a Zephyrian battlecruiser rather than surrender. The explosion took out both vessels, but it also opened a gap in the enemy formation that the bioships exploited with ruthless efficiency. "By the ancient stars," Princess Lyrelei breathed as she watched the tactical display. "They actually did it." The Zephyrian fleet, faced with an enemy that refused to accept defeat and allies they had never encountered before, made the decision to retreat. It was the first major victory either the humans or the Astral Kingdom had achieved against the Empire, and it sent shockwaves through the entire galaxy. News of the alliance spread quickly through both civilian and military channels. Other neutral species began to reconsider their positions, wondering if the tide of the war might actually be turning. The Zephyrian Empire, meanwhile, accelerated their military production and began developing new tactics to counter the unexpected threat. For Marcus, the victory was bittersweet. He had found a new purpose among the aliens who had saved his life, but he was still technically a civilian caught up in a war that seemed to grow larger and more complex every day. He had no official rank or position, yet he found himself consulted on everything from fleet tactics to diplomatic protocols. "You have become something unique," Princess Lyrelay told him one evening as they stood in one of the ship's observation lounges, watching the stars stream past. Neither fully human nor truly one of us, yet essential to both. I'm not sure how I feel about that, Marcus admitted. A few weeks ago, I was just a mining technician trying to make an honest living. Now I'm apparently some kind of bridge between species. Perhaps that is what the galaxy needs right now, she suggested. Someone who can see beyond the boundaries that separate us. What about you? Marcus asked. How do you feel about everything that's happened? She was quiet for a moment, her alien features thoughtful in the starlight. I feel alive, she said finally. For the first time in my 4 centuries of existence, I feel like I am truly living rather than simply existing. Is that a human concept you picked up from me? Marcus asked with a smile. Perhaps, she admitted. Or perhaps it is something that all sentient beings possess, waiting for the right circumstances to awaken it. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. A priority message had arrived from Terran Command, marked with the highest security classifications. Marcus and the princess made their way to the command center, where Queen Lyrelay was already reviewing the transmission with her senior officers. Her expression was grim as she gestured for them to join her. The Zephyrians have responded to our alliance, she announced without preamble. They are mobilizing their reserve fleets and calling in ships from across the Empire. Intelligence estimates suggest they are preparing for a massive offensive designed to end this war once and for all. How massive? Marcus asked. Over 2,000 capital ships, supported by 10 times that number in smaller vessels, one of the human officers replied via the communication link. The largest fleet deployment in recorded history. Princess Lyrelay looked stricken. Against such numbers. We'll do what we always do, Marcus interrupted. We'll fight with everything we have and we'll find a way to win. Human optimism is admirable, the Queen said, but we must be realistic about our chances. Even with our combined fleets, we are outnumbered at least 5-1. Numbers aren't everything, Marcus replied. The Zephyrians have been winning this war by conquering one system at a time, consolidating their gains, then moving on. They've never had to deal with a truly united opposition before. What are you suggesting? Marcus looked around the command center, seeing the faces of beings from 2 different species united in their determination to fight for freedom. An idea was forming, dangerous and probably insane, but potentially game-changing. I'm suggesting we don't give them the chance to use those numbers effectively, he said. Instead of waiting for them to come to us, we take the fight to them. We hit their home system, force them to commit their reserves to defense instead of offense. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Princess Lyrelay spoke. You're talking about invading the Zephyrian home system, their most heavily defended territory, protected by orbital fortresses that have never been breached. I'm talking about doing something they'll never expect, Marcus corrected. Something so audacious that it might just work. Queen Lyrelay studied him with those ancient, knowing eyes. Explain your reasoning, young human. The Zephyrians think they know how this war will end, Marcus said, his voice gaining confidence as the plan solidified in his mind. They're planning one massive offensive to crush all resistance at once. They're committing everything to that attack, which means their home system will be more lightly defended than it's been in decades. More lightly defended is still heavily defended, one of the human officers pointed out. But not against the kind of attack we could mount, Marcus replied. Their defenses are designed to stop conventional fleets using conventional tactics. They're not designed to stop bioships that can think creatively, guided by human tactical knowledge. The debate that followed was intense and wide-ranging. Military officers from both species pointed out the enormous risks and likely casualties of such an operation. Politicians worried about the diplomatic consequences if the attack failed. Logistics experts questioned whether the combined fleet could even reach the Zephyrian home system without being detected and intercepted. But underneath all the practical concerns was a growing sense that Marcus might be right. The war couldn't be won through defensive actions and gradual attrition. At some point, someone would have to take a massive risk to change the fundamental dynamic of the conflict. The final decision came from an unexpected source. The ship's consciousness, the ancient entity that Marcus had taught to think tactically, made its opinion known through the chamber's communication systems. The human speaks wisdom. The ship's voice resonated through the walls themselves. To preserve what we value, we must risk losing it. This is the nature of true commitment. Queen Lyreley nodded slowly. Very well. We will put this proposal to the Federation Command and the Council of Ships. If they agree, we will attempt this mad human plan. And if they don't agree? Princess Lyreley asked. Her mother's smile was sharp as a blade. Then we will remind them that sometimes the greatest victories come from the greatest risks. After all, that is the lesson our human friend has taught us. As the Starweaver changed course toward the emergency meeting point where the combined fleet was assembling, Marcus found himself wondering what he had set in motion. The plan that was forming could save both species from Zephyrian conquest, or it could result in the destruction of everything they had worked to build. But as he looked around at the alien faces that had become familiar to him, at the princess who had become something more than a friend, at the ancient queen who had risked everything to do what was right, he knew they had no choice but to try. The war was entering its final phase, and the outcome would depend on whether two very different species could trust each other enough to attempt the impossible. As Marcus settled in to help plan humanity's most desperate gamble, he reflected that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons and ships, but with faith and hope, and the willingness to stand together against the darkness. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn what happened when you threatened people who refused to surrender, guided by allies who had found something worth fighting for. It was going to be a very interesting war indeed. The Emergency War Council convened at the hidden asteroid base known only as Sanctuary 7. Representatives from 47 human worlds gathered alongside the entire council of ships from the Astral Kingdom. The meeting chamber, hastily carved from living rock and reinforced with both human technology and alien biotechnology, buzzed with tension and desperate hope. Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of presenting the invasion plan to the assembled leaders. As he stood before the mixed crowd of humans and aliens, he could see the skepticism in many faces, the desperation in others, and the grim determination that had become the hallmark of both species as they faced extinction. The plan relies on three key factors, Marcus explained, gesturing to the holographic display that showed the Zephyrian home system. Speed, surprise, and the unique capabilities of our bioships. Admiral Chen leaned forward from the human delegation. Explain the speed component. How do we reach their home system without being detected? Princess Lyreley stood to answer. Our bioships can travel through what you call hyperspace in ways that conventional vessels cannot. We can take routes that are impossible for metal ships, emerging directly into their inner system without using the standard jump points they'll be monitoring. And the surprise element? Asked Admiral Reyes from the Mars Defense Fleet. The Zephyrians are expecting us to defend our remaining worlds, Marcus replied. Every strategic projection they've made assumes we'll fight a delaying action while they mass their forces for the final offensive. They're not expecting us to attack their heartland. An elderly human General Marcus didn't recognize raised his hand. What about their defenses? The Zephyrian home system is supposed to be impregnable. It is, admitted Queen Lyreley from where she sat with the alien delegation. Under normal circumstances, but our bioships have capabilities that their defensive planners have never encountered. We can adapt in real time to their countermeasures, evolve new tactics during the battle itself. That's the third factor, Marcus added. The bioships don't just follow pre-programmed strategies. They think, they learn, they can coordinate in ways that are impossible for conventional fleets. The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Many of the human commanders argued that the plan was too risky, that they couldn't afford to lose their remaining fleet strength on a desperate gamble. Some of the alien representatives worried that attacking the Zephyrian home system would provoke retaliation that could destroy entire civilizations. But as the hours passed, a consensus began to emerge. Every alternative strategy led to the same conclusion: slow defeat through attrition. The Zephyrians had too many ships, too many worlds, too many resources. Only a dramatic action could change the fundamental dynamic of the war. The final vote was closer than Marcus had hoped, but decisive enough to matter. 31 human worlds voted to support the invasion plan, with 16 abstaining and none voting against. The Astral Kingdom was unanimous in their support, which surprised some of the human delegates who had expected more caution from the ancient alien civilization. "When do we begin?" Admiral Chen asked as the formal proceedings concluded. "Immediately," Queen Lyrale replied. "Every day we delay gives the Zephyrians more time to strengthen their defenses and deploy their reserve fleets. The window of opportunity will not remain open long." The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of preparation and coordination. The combined fleet assembled in the shadow of a dead star, using its gravity well to mask their energy signatures from long-range sensors. Marcus watched in amazement as human and alien crews worked side by side, sharing technology and tactics that had never been integrated before. The bioships underwent modifications that would have been impossible without human engineering expertise. Quantum communication arrays were grown into their living hulls, allowing real-time coordination across vast distances. Defensive systems were enhanced with human shield technology adapted to biological matrices. Weapons systems were upgraded with projectile designs that took advantage of the ship's ability to manufacture ammunition from raw materials. Meanwhile, the human vessels received biotechnological enhancements that seemed like magic to crews accustomed to purely mechanical systems. Self-repairing hull plating that could seal breaches automatically. Organic computer systems that could process tactical data faster than any artificial intelligence. Life support systems that could adapt to environmental changes in real time. "It's like watching evolution in fast forward," Marcus commented to Princess Lyrale as they toured one of the modified human destroyers. "Perhaps that is exactly what it is," she replied. "Two species adapting to survive in an environment that threatens them both." The princess had changed over the weeks since their first meeting. Where once she had been curious but cautious about humans, now she showed a deep understanding of their nature and capabilities. She had become one of the primary advocates for the alliance within her own people, arguing that the partnership had made both species stronger than they could ever be alone. "I've been thinking about what you said before," Marcus told her as they watched human and alien technicians work together on a particularly complex integration project. "About feeling alive for the first time in 4 centuries. "Yes, I think I understand what you meant. I've been alive for 34 years, but I've only really been living since I met you and your people. Before that, I was just going through the motions, working and sleeping and working again without any real purpose." She smiled at that, the expression still slightly alien, but somehow perfectly familiar to him now. "Perhaps that is what happens when we find something truly worth fighting for. We discover parts of ourselves we never knew existed." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the fleet command ship. The final preparations were complete, and the invasion force was ready to depart. Marcus and Princess Lyrale made their way to the bridge of the Starweaver, where the atmosphere was tense with anticipation and fear. "All ships report ready," announced the fleet coordinator, a human officer who had been cross-trained to work with bioship systems. "We have a go for Operation Starburst." Queen Lyrale looked around the command center, her ancient eyes taking in the faces of both human and alien crew members. "In all my years," she said quietly, "I have never been part of something so important. What we do in the next few hours will determine the fate of countless worlds and billions of lives." "No pressure," Marcus muttered, earning a few nervous chuckles from the nearby crew members. "Actually," the Queen continued, "that is exactly right. There should be pressure. There should be the weight of responsibility and the fear of failure. Those feelings will keep us focused and determined. They are part of what makes us alive." The transition into hyperspace was unlike anything Marcus had experienced before. Human ships entered hyperspace with a violent lurch that threw everything around the bridge. The bioships simply flowed. One moment they were in normal space, the next they were traveling through dimensions that human physics barely understood, guided by alien senses that could navigate by the songs of distant stars. The journey to the Zephyrian home system took 18 hours, during which Marcus found himself unable to sleep or even sit still. He walked the corridors of the Starweaver, talking with crew members from both species, listening to their hopes and fears about the battle to come. "Why do you think we're doing this?" a young human pilot asked him during one of these impromptu conversations. "I mean, really doing this? It's not just about winning the war, is it?" Marcus thought about that question for a long time before answering. I think it's about proving that the galaxy doesn't have to belong to the strongest or the most ruthless. Sometimes the people who care about each other, who are willing to sacrifice for something greater than themselves, can find a way to win against impossible odds. That's very philosophical for a mining technician, the pilot observed with a grin. I've had some very good teachers recently, Marcus replied, glancing toward the bridge where Princess Lyrale was coordinating with the fleet's navigation specialists. The moment of truth came when they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian home system. The tactical displays immediately lit up with contact signatures, hundreds of ships, orbital platforms, defense stations, and the massive ring-shaped structure that surrounded the central planet like a mechanical halo. By all the gods of space, breathed one of the human officers. It's even bigger than the intelligence reports suggested. Magnificent, Queen Lyrale said with genuine admiration. They have built something truly impressive here. It will be a shame to destroy it. Are you having second thoughts? Marcus asked. Not at all, the Queen replied. I simply appreciate good craftsmanship even when it belongs to my enemies. The Zephyrian response was immediate and overwhelming. Patrol fleets converged on their position from 3 different directions, while the orbital defenses began charging their massive energy weapons. Warning transmissions flooded the communication channels, demanding surrender in a dozen different languages. Attack Pattern Alpha, Queen Lyrale ordered calmly. All ships remember your training, adapt, evolve, survive. The battle that followed was like nothing ever seen in the history of galactic warfare. The bioships moved through space like living creatures, coordinating their attacks with an efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. They flowed around enemy fire like schools of fish avoiding predators, struck like pack hunters isolating their prey, and adapted their tactics in real time as the Zephyrian defenders tried to counter them. The human ships fought with their characteristic stubborn determination, but now they had support that multiplied their effectiveness. When a destroyer found itself surrounded by enemy cruisers, bioships would appear from unexpected angles to drive off the attackers. When human fighters ran low on ammunition, they could dock with the organic vessels to be rearmed and refueled in minutes rather than hours. But the real genius of the plan became apparent as they penetrated deeper into the system. The Zephyrians had been forced to recall ships from across their empire to defend against this unexpected threat. Fleets that had been massing for the final offensive against human worlds were now racing back to protect their capital. It's working, Princess Lyrale reported as the tactical displays updated with new intelligence from their long-range sensors. They're pulling ships from 3 different sectors to reinforce their home defenses. Which means our remaining colonies have breathing room, Marcus added. Even if we don't succeed here, we've bought time for evacuations and reinforcements. We will succeed, Queen Lyrale stated with absolute confidence, because failure is not acceptable. The Queen was right, but the cost was higher than any of them had expected. The Zephyrian defenders fought with desperate fury, knowing that their entire civilization was at stake. Ships on both sides died in explosions that lit up the darkness of space like brief, terrible stars. Marcus watched from the bridge as a human cruiser took a direct hit from a Zephyrian battleship and broke apart, its crew of 800 lost in an instant. A moment later, 3 bioships converged on the enemy vessel like avenging angels, their living weapons tearing through its hull with organic precision. This is butchery, whispered one of the younger alien crew members. No, Marcus corrected firmly. This is war. The butchery was what they did to the colonies, to the civilians who couldn't fight back. This is justice. The turning point came when they reached the inner system and faced the massive orbital defense ring directly. The structure was kilometers wide and hundreds of kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. But it had been designed to fight conventional ships using conventional tactics. Princess, Marcus said suddenly as an idea struck him, can the bioships physically attach themselves to the ring? Yes, but why would we? Her eyes widened as she understood. You want to board it. I want to turn it against itself, Marcus corrected. Your ships can interface with any biological or semi-biological system, right? What if that ring has biological components in its computer systems? Most advanced Zephyrian technology does, she confirmed. But accessing their command systems would require physical contact and significant time. Then we make the time, Marcus declared. He turned to the communication officer. Get me a channel to the fleet commanders. What followed was the most audacious military maneuver in recorded history. While the main fleet engaged the Zephyrian defenders in a massive space battle, a small group of bioships broke away from the fighting and approached the orbital ring directly. They latched onto its hull like parasites, extending neural tendrils into its command systems. The process was dangerous and complex. Zephyrian security systems fought back against the intrusion, trying to prevent the bioships from accessing critical controls. But the organic vessels had something the defenders had never encountered: the ability to learn and adapt faster than any computer system could counter them. Marcus found himself in the extraordinary position of serving as a translator between human tactical thinking and alien biological intuition. As the bioships worked to penetrate the ring's defenses, he helped them understand which systems to target for maximum effect. There, he said, pointing to a section of the tactical display. That's the primary power distribution network. If you can overload it, the whole ring will lose main power. But the backup systems will engage, Princess Lyreley pointed out. Not if you make the ring think the backups are the primary threat, Marcus replied. Convince its security systems that the backup power grid is being sabotaged by the enemy. It'll shut down its own defenses to protect against an attack that isn't happening. The plan worked better than anyone had dared hope. The massive orbital ring, the pride of Zephyrian military engineering, turned its own weapons against the defending fleet. Stations that had been pouring fire into the Allied ships suddenly swiveled to target Zephyrian vessels instead. Defense platforms began firing on each other as their friend or foe identification systems were scrambled beyond recognition. Within 2 hours, the most heavily defended system in the galaxy had become a shooting gallery with the defenders as the targets. Zephyrian ships fled in all directions, trying to escape the chaos they couldn't understand or control. But the final victory came not from superior tactics or advanced technology. It came from a single moment of human stubborn courage that changed everything. The Zephyrian Emperor himself arrived on his massive flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon bristling with enough firepower to destroy planets. He came to personally oversee the defense of his capital, confident that his presence would rally his forces and turn the tide of battle. Instead, he found himself facing something he had never encountered before: an enemy that refused to be intimidated by superior force. When the Emperor's flagship opened fire on the Starweaver, demanding the surrender of the Allied fleet, Queen Lyreley's response was broadcast on all frequencies for the entire galaxy to hear. I am Lyreley, Queen of the Astral Kingdom, and this human beside me is Marcus Chen of Earth, she announced, her ancient voice carrying the authority of millennia. We do not surrender to tyrants, we do not bow to bullies, and we will not allow you to enslave the galaxy unopposed. The Emperor's reply was immediate and furious. You harbor a terrorist and a criminal. Surrender the human and withdraw your ships, or I will destroy every vessel in your fleet. That's when Princess Lyreley stepped forward, her young voice clear and strong over the communication channels. He is my human companion, she declared boldly. Under the ancient laws of sanctuary and protection, he is under my personal guard. To harm him, you must go through me. The silence that followed was deafening. Across the galaxy, on worlds human and alien alike, beings listened to the sound of a princess publicly defying the most powerful emperor in known space to protect a simple human who had somehow become the symbol of their alliance. Marcus felt his heart swell with emotions he couldn't even name. This alien princess, this being from a species he had never known existed a few months ago, was willing to risk everything to defend him, not because of his tactical value or strategic importance, but because it was the right thing to do. Princess, he said softly, you don't have to. Yes, I do, she replied, never taking her eyes off the communication display. This is what we fight for, not territory or resources or glory, but the right to choose who we protect and who we stand with. That is what makes us different from them. The Emperor's response was predictably violent. His flagship opened fire with every weapon it possessed, trying to destroy the Starweaver and end the symbol of resistance it represented. But the ancient bioship was not defenseless, and it was no longer fighting alone. The entire combined fleet moved to protect their flagships, human and alien vessels intermingling in a defensive formation that turned the Emperor's overwhelming firepower against itself. Ships that should have been enemies coordinated their movements with precision that seemed impossible, guided by the same biological neural networks that connected the bioships. In the end, it wasn't superior technology or clever tactics that won the battle. It was something much simpler and much more powerful, the willingness of two very different species to risk everything for each other. When the Emperor's flagship finally succumbed to the combined assault, when its massive hull cracked open like an egg to spill its contents into the void, the psychological effect on the Zephyrian Empire was immediate and devastating. Their god emperor, the being they believed was invincible, had been defeated by the very creatures he had dismissed as inferior. The Zephyrian fleet surrendered within hours, and news of the victory spread through the galaxy faster than the speed of light itself. Worlds that had been conquered by the Empire began to rebel. Species that had been enslaved rose up against their oppressors. The alliance between humanity and the Astral Kingdom had done more than win a battle. It had ignited a revolution. In the aftermath, as they tended to their wounded and counted their dead, Marcus found himself alone with Princess Lyrelei in one of the ship's observation lounges. Through the transparent walls, they could see the wreckage of the great battle drifting slowly through space, lit by the light of distant stars. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now we help the galaxy rebuild," she replied. "The Zephyrian Empire is finished, but that leaves a power vacuum that could be filled by other tyrants if we're not careful. The alliance we've built here will need to grow and evolve to ensure that freedom survives." "And us?" Marcus asked quietly. "What happens to us?" She was silent for a moment, her alien features thoughtful in the starlight. "I do not know," she admitted. "Our peoples will remain allies, I think. There is too much we can learn from each other to go back to the way things were. But you and I, that is a more complex question." "Why?" "Because you are human and I am not," she said simply. "Our lives are measured differently. You will age and die while I am still young by my people's standards. That is not a difference that can be easily overcome." Marcus nodded, feeling a sadness he hadn't expected. The princess was right, of course. The gulf between their species wasn't just cultural or technological. It was biological, fundamental, perhaps insurmountable. But then he thought about everything they had accomplished together, all the impossible barriers they had already overcome. Two species that had never met before had learned to fight side by side. Ancient bioships had learned to think tactically. Peaceful beings had found the courage to stand up to tyrants. If all of that was possible, maybe other impossible things were possible too. "Princess," he said carefully, "in all your studies of human culture, did you ever come across our concept of love?" "I have heard the word," she replied cautiously. "It refers to strong emotional attachment between individuals, does it not?" "Among other things," Marcus said with a smile. "But the most important thing about love is that it doesn't care about differences. It doesn't care about species or lifespans or cultural barriers. It exists because two people, two beings, choose to care more about each other than about anything else." "You speak of love as though it were a force of nature." "Isn't it?" Marcus asked. "Look what happened when your mother chose to love justice more than safety. Look what happened when you chose to protect me instead of pursuing political advantage. Love doesn't solve every problem, but it gives us reasons to solve the problems ourselves." Princess Lyrelei was quiet for a long time, staring out at the stars. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but certain. "My people live for centuries," she said. "We have time for everything, learning, exploring, contemplating. But perhaps that is why we sometimes forget the urgency of truly living. You humans, with your brief lives, understand something we often miss. Which is that every moment matters, that every day is precious because there are only so many of them. That love, when it appears, should be cherished rather than analyzed." Marcus felt his heart start to race as he began to understand what she was saying. "Are you telling me?" "I am telling you," she said, turning to face him with those large, expressive eyes, "that I would rather spend 50 years truly living with you than 500 years merely existing without you." They came together slowly, carefully, two beings from different worlds learning what it meant to bridge the space between species with something as simple and complex as love. Outside the observation lounge, the galaxy continued its ancient dance. But inside that small space, two hearts found a rhythm that transcended every difference between them. Later, as they held each other and watched the stars wheel overhead, Princess Lyreley spoke again. "When the alien queen questioned you," she said softly, "when my mother demanded to know what you could offer in return for sanctuary, do you remember what you told her?" "Hope," Marcus replied. "I told her I could offer hope." "You were right," she said. "But you offered more than just hope. You offered us a future we never knew we wanted. A chance to be more than we were, to become something new and wonderful together." "Is that what this is?" Marcus asked. "Something new and wonderful?" "I believe it is," she replied. "The first human-alien partnership in recorded history, the beginning of something the galaxy has never seen before." "No pressure," Marcus said, echoing his earlier comment and earning a laugh from the princess. "Actually," she said, borrowing her mother's words, "that is exactly right. There should be pressure. There should be responsibility and commitment and the determination to make this work despite all the obstacles we'll face." "Are you ready for that?" Marcus asked seriously. "For all the questions and complications and political problems that are going to come with this?" "Are you?" she countered. Marcus thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The desperate escape from his destroyed ship, the rescue that had changed both their lives, the battles they had fought and won together, the impossible alliance they had helped forge between their peoples. "I think," he said finally, "that I've been preparing for this my whole life without knowing it. Every choice I've made, every risk I've taken, every time I refused to give up when things looked hopeless, it all led to this moment, to you, to us." "Then we face the future together," Princess Lyreley declared, "whatever it brings." Outside the observation lounge, the stars continued their eternal dance, but now they danced for an audience that included something new under their ancient light. Love had found a way to bridge the vast darkness between worlds, proving once again that the most impossible things were sometimes the most necessary. The war was over, the alliance was secure, and the galaxy was free to grow in ways no one had imagined. And at the heart of it all, a simple human mining technician and an alien princess had discovered that some bonds transcend species, time, and space itself. When the history books were written, they would record the great battles and political achievements of the human-astral alliance. They would note the technological advances and cultural exchanges that followed. They would analyze the strategic decisions that led to victory over the Zephyrian Empire. But the real story, the one that mattered most, was simpler than all of that. It was the story of two beings who found each other across the darkness of space and chose to build something beautiful together. It was proof that hope, when shared between hearts that refuse to surrender, can indeed change the galaxy. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, aboard a living ship that had learned to think tactically and love deeply, that story continued to unfold with each passing day, each shared moment, each decision to face an uncertain future with courage and joy, and the absolute certainty that they were stronger together than they could ever be apart. The universe was vast and dangerous, and full of wonders beyond,